Hey there, this is Yoshi.
And Violet.
Hi, Violet.
Hello.
Can you tell me or tell your, well, not your, but our,
The people of YouTube.
right, what you did yesterday?
I did the raffle at Northwest Orchid Society meeting. Please subscribe to Daddy's channel if you like the videos. Whoop.
To the screen, our guest speaker tonight, Ron Parsons.
So I just want to say thank you for putting up with me to do this on Zoom. I wish I could be in there. I really like your society. I've spoke there a number of times, so yeah, I appreciate this. So here is Haberei medusa, one of about 800 species in this worldwide genus. This particular species, you'll see it fairly commonly now. It seems to be quite easy to grow. I know people are growing them and they're increasing in size in their collections. Their bulbs are multiplying, and so it's a really nice thing to see with the terrestrial orchid. The species range is from Malaysia, which is actually Borneo, Sumatra, Java, and Sulawesi. So it's an incredible species, as you can see here. Here's a really nice plant, panther. It's found around the world in the Northern Hemisphere. And we have some in California, we have some on the West Coast, the Western United States, but the Eastern United States lucked out with the real beautiful ones. They've got the fringe one, always with a couple hundred plants. But when Mary and I went there, we wanted to show her the picture plants and such there, and the species and other orchids, and we saw probably about 2,000 of them. So just a small portion of them that year. So just incredible. Another related genus to Haberei is Pectilis, and this, although it's not all that rare, it's kind of more difficult to grow. This is a beautiful species commonly known as the Egret Orchid. It's from China, Japan, and Korea. It needs a very cold rest. It's actually because it's covered in snow in the wild, but I know people have grown this. I don't know anybody currently who's kept it alive for a number of years, but you'll see it occasionally on the market. In China, I was on one of Holger and Wenqing Perner's trips to Sichuan. Sichuan is just east of Tibet. It's actually considered Western China, and we went there basically to see Cypripedium species, the Northern Hemisphere latest of orchids. And we went to this one site. Holger said, don't take any pictures. Well, you can take pictures of the area, but don't post any of them because they're really rare Cypripedium in that region, and we don't want anybody to know where they are. People go online and find that kind of information. But while there, we found this plant, and actually Holger thought it was unnamed. In the interim, I found out that it's actually a Pon Orchis. It was thought to be a Amidostigma. That genus is gone. It says Pon Orchis and Plexicoli, but you can see it's very cute, a little human-like shape there. Really charming, brilliant colors, lovely plant. I love this thing. Marnie Turkel, I think she has spoken for your society, grew this plant. This is a species from Africa called Brachycorythis calbraei. There's actually a number of species in this genus. Marnie was growing this plant. It got to be about 2 feet tall. Each flower is substantial, about 1.5 or 1.75 inches tall, and has this wonderful fragrance. It's funny how many purple orchids smell like grape Kool-Aid. So I like the jewel orchids. I don't grow any because I don't have the conditions, but I really like them. People know for their foliage, as you can see in the lower picture, that's a picture of an unidentified species. That gives you an example of what the beautiful foliage is and what the term jewel orchid means. So with that, I like this genus very much because I find the flowers very attractive. And with this picture, I have to say that I've noticed this theme through my talk in the last several times I've given it, that I have this thing for fringes and fur and fuzz, and I realized my hair's a little thin on top, and there's some kind of correlation there going on. I didn't really pick up on it, but I think that has to do something with the kind of Freudian beauty. This is an unusual species only because of the name, actually. It's a very high elevation orchid in the Andes. The genus is an Andean orchid. It's called Aa. It was given that name not for any meaning, but just that it would be the first plant listed of any list of all plants in the world. It's the very first genus that come out. So I love the bee orchids. I've gone to Europe a number of times to see the bee orchids, and I've actually seen most of them. They're beautiful, they're fascinating. There's a number of species, and taxonomically they're a mess. People name every little variety. I've actually seen a plant with more than one so-called variety on a single spike. So it kind of just shows you it's kind of a fake taxonomy. But there's a lot of people there who study or who go out and look at them, and that's their only exposure to orchids. They don't grow orchids. They don't know about the variation within orchids. And so they've given all these varietal subspecies names. I don't find most of them to be true or valid, but anyway, this is a beautiful one. It's a bee orchid, but this one they call the mirror orchid because of that shiny blue spot on the lip. These plants are all from Western Europe all the way over to, some of them are found as far east as Iran, but not very many. Most of them are European around the Mediterranean. This one, a beautiful one, is just another species from Crete. I saw this. This is endemic to the island of Crete, the largest Greek island, and I love it. I think it's just exemplifies the beauty of this genus, the furriness and the patterns and such. So, plant we found in Sulawesi. Actually, we were shown this plant. We didn't find it on our own, but I went on a trip to Sulawesi, which is one of the largest islands in the world and part of Indonesia. We saw this Corvus. Corvus is the group commonly known as helmet orchids, and I knew them from Australia. There's a number of species in Australia, but they're more like, they don't have any of these appendages like this one, and their leaves are pure green. Corvus pictamines painted, that's because of the silver overlay in the one single leaf that these plants get. So anyway, this is a wonderful species. It was on the market for a very short period of time. Unfortunately, they're very difficult to cultivate. At least people haven't really figured it out yet. And so I'm not encouraging the growth of any terrestrials other than the ones that really are kind of on the market. So I've been to Australia 11 times. I love it there. I actually moved there. I could move there, but they've got their own set of problems there too. A lot of fires, a lot of pyromaniacs and such. Anyway, this is a species, speaking of fires, this one only comes up after fires. As you can see there, it's called the lizard orchid. For whatever reason, I do not know. It's the only one in its genus called Burnetia, the cuneata, and it comes out of the ground without any chlorophyll or leaves. That's it. What you see is what you get. It's a really charming little plant. And you only see it, many of the Australian people who go out look for orchids have never seen this species. Another beautiful Australian orchid. This genus is mostly Australian. There are a few found outside of Australia, such as New Zealand, and I believe some found in New Guinea. But these are called the Sun Orchids, and that's because they need warmth and bright sun to open up when they're in bud. If they don't get that, if they get a foggy days, they might try to open, but they generally don't open very much, and they need full warmth on a hot day to actually open up fully. But what's known about this group is so many of the species are blue. There's lots of yellow ones and the pinkish ones and stuff. The blue ones are the ones that always catch everyone's eye. I photographed this in Southwest Australia. We're in the Perth area. It's called Thelomitra crinita. It's actually the closest relatives to the Thelomitra, to the Sun Orchids. These are the beard orchids for obvious reasons. Calicalis means beautiful lip, and this one is I've seen in Tasmania and Victoria, and actually, I believe in New South Wales also. But I love them because of the beard, the eyes, the nose, everything about it's just an incredible orchid. Flowers are relatively small, they're only about an inch or so, but I wanted to see one of these for the longest time. For those of you who are older, you might remember an old National Geographic article on orchids a long time ago. It had a picture of a beard orchid, so it had always been on my mind to see that. So when I finally got to Australia the first time, and I wanted to see these, I actually saw 3 in one day. So that's extremely rare. This is a very localized species, only from a number of acres in the central coast area of New South Wales. It's not been found anywhere else. It's very, very rare. I believe it's on the endangered species list, and they've got, they're having to get legal protection for it. This is a number of species in the same area. So this is Calicalis pulchellus. A favorite of mine when I go to Australia is the flying duck orchid, and I think that's obvious why it's called that. So what's interesting is that the head of the duck is actually the lip of the orchid, and the dorsal sepal, it's a non-recipient orchid, so the dorsal sepal is the one at the very bottom. And the 2 thin ones that come alongside the brown chest, those are the petals. And the lateral sepals are the ones that are his wings. So anyway, it's only one in its genus, Caldiana major, and lot, if not most, of the Australian terrestrials are pollinated by these kinds of wasps called thinniid wasps. And so when the male wasp, again, they come out of the ground early looking for a mate, they have a tendency to want to take the mate back to their nest and mate with them there. So in these orchids have evolved to actually kind of to work with that. The male wasp lands on the head and tries to take the bee, what he thinks is the female, back to his nest. What happens is the hinge shuts tight, the head drops into the chest of what you see as the chest here, and the pollen gets on the wasp back, and then he does it again in the pollinating the orchid. I think he's fooled after a little bit, but sure is an amazing way to get pollinated an orchid. And you can see the lip is that weird warty head. We don't even know what that looks like, but you can see a hinge right at the bend there. Same thing. You look opposite that. There's the column. So same thing. The male wasp tries to grab the female of the lip of the orchid, and it flings her right into the column. It's amazing. A really incredible thing. These Draceas, these hammer orchids, only live in Southwest Australia and only in white sand areas. If you don't find white sand areas, which are usually not very, just little patches of it, that's where you'll find this and a few other orchids like the small flying duck orchids, different genus. The donkey orchids are well known throughout Australia from the southeast and the southwest. The southwest has the most beautiful ones, and there can be in abundant colonies. This is Diurus magnifica, and it really truly is a beautiful, beautiful orchid. I've seen these in colonies of hundreds of them. Another beautiful Southwest orchid. This is Southwest Australian orchid. This is the genus Caldini has over 100 species, and there's about 4 or 5 floral forms, like so say with groups within the genus. But this group of them is called the spider Caldinias because of the long, drawn-out segments. So if you look in the dorsal sepal as well as the two ventral sepals, lateral sepals, you'll see a thickening. The dorsal sepal is about half of the dorsal thickened, and in the bottom about a third of them. Those are called osmophores. They release fragrances that only the wasps can smell, as well as this one, which only grows coastally. Actually, we saw this in the coast. That part of the coast basically is the Indian Ocean. Next stop is Africa. And what was really cool about this, we turned around, there was a huge herd, I don't know what you call a herd of kangaroos, but they're all massive kangaroos. It was pretty cool. This is a real beauty. It's the white is just stunning. And my friends in Australia get really excited about, they'll find a leaf of an orchid and oh wow, look, and I'm like, that's a leaf, there's not even a flower. I don't get the connection, but anyway. I love this thing. I know that I think you guys must be growing a few Pterostalis up there. We've got about 4 or 5 species in the Bay Area that we grow. But that's another genus that it got split up into about 13 genera, then they all got put back in Pterostalis. So there's a lot of different floral forms within the genus. And this one they call these the bird orchids for whatever reason. But this is a beautiful thing. This is about a 3-inch flower. When I found this, it's the only ones we saw was this pair. And the flower from top to top is about 3 inches. It's really, and I love it. It's translucent. You can see the yellow inside the hood. That's the pollinia. You can see the translucency of it. It's just a stunning thing, I feel. We're in terrestrial still, but now we're switching to the lady silver orchids. This is, again, as I mentioned, I was with Holger and Wenqing. And for those of you who know of Holger and Wenqing, Holger died suddenly and unexpectedly back about 4 years ago. This species was one of the more common ones we saw. It's the Cypripedium tibeticum. It was the first Cypripedium we saw. First one we saw was about 13,000 feet. They range from kind of reddish to brownish. They're large flowers on a small plant. They really are an incredible thing. I love the Cypripediums because to me they kind of evoke true wild nature. They will not grow where soils are disturbed. They're actually a real wildflower in the sense that they won't be around anywhere where it really has been disturbed. So a Cypripedium called Haberei. So it wasn't growing very far away from that population or those tibeticums you saw a minute ago. So I want to show this though. Note the top of the pouch. It's kind of pinched, and you can see it's got those teeth along the top of the pouch. So it's a beautiful color. It's yellow. It's striped. It reminds me of the Apathelum hybrid called Dog Goldie a little bit. Anyway, we found a number of them, but not a lot. And then Mary was with me on the trip. My co-author Mary was on with me, and she was, we worked right together. She found this, and she didn't think anything of it. But this is actually, we got back to the bus for lunch, and she said, "What do you think of this tibeticum?" And I went, "Oh my God, that's not tibeticum. That's that hybrid. That's that natural hybrid." So this is a natural hybrid that Holger named for Wenqing. So it's Cypripedium X Wenqingii. It's a hybrid of the tibeticum you saw and the last 2 slides. And note that the top of the pouch, unlike the smooth edge of tibeticum, it's got that toothed margin. So it's a really, really exciting find. We only found 2 flowers of it. I was in Ecuador right before COVID hit. I was there in December of 2019, and I was with Gilberto Marino. People say Gilberto, but He's worked for Equihena, and now he works for his own company, or works with Equiflora, another company, another Portilla family company. Anyway, so we were looking for this. It's another lady slipper orchid. There are 5 genera in the lady slipper subfamily. There is obviously Paphiopedilum from tropical Asia, Phragmipedium from tropical Americas, Mexipedium endemic to Mexico, parts of Mexico, Cypripedium, which we've seen around the northern hemisphere, and Solenopedium. Solenopedium is a South American genus too. It grows kind of a soft leaf, kind of tallish plant, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet tall. And the flowers last 1 day. A couple other things, the Phragmipedium. I waited a long time to see this species, and now I've seen a bunch of them because this grower in the Bay Area had a number of them. But this is the famed Phragmipedium kovacii from Peru. That there was this struggle to actually get it named, to be the first one to have it named. So there was the people, like Eric Christensen wanted to name it Peruvianum for the country of origin, and there's these other people who wanted to name it Kovac after a gentleman in Kovac, and so they smuggled it in the United States to Selby Gardens to name it, and they got the publication in first, but as you know, that story didn't end well. So this is interesting because I was on the island of Sulawesi, but we saw one in a collection, but it wasn't in flower. It wasn't until a couple years ago I saw it in a collection here, and I'm not sure it actually should be in the United States. You know, all of the orchids are on the Siamese one, and so they all need paperwork and documentation. So the gentleman who had this, I'm not sure, but I don't think it should be here. But anyway, it's one of the multiflorals. So it's related to Rothschildiana and Prastons and that group, Philippinensis. Anyway, but you can see it's got these weird curly short tails. The flowers individually are not that big, maybe 2.5 inches, but it is a very striking orchid. And the last slip orchid is this one. It's also the same grower. And also I feel that it probably should be in the United States. This was found fairly recently. It was published a number of years ago, but not that long ago. And that whole plant, even though it can get bigger than 6 inches, which is why we didn't include it in our book, which is our limit, this one was only about 2 inches across. The flower is as big as the plant. It was stunning. This is, I believe it's from the Laos and Myanmar border area. So this is Paphiopedilum rumseriana. And again, I feel real lucky to have gotten to see this plant. All right, out of that, so we're going to go to the Monoclonal Orchids. Interestingly, the flowers are identical to Ursianum, but Ursianum has silvery markings on the leaves, and it is about the same size plant. It's a little 2-inch plant with these beautiful flowers, but they don't really, but the plant's quite different. So it may or may not end up being the same, just the form, but we're going to call it CF, which means similar to, basically means similar to Ursianum from Madagascar. Another one, this was for a long time, was considered an Aeranthes. That's a genus that has most species in tropical Africa with very few in Madagascar. But there's this outlier, this weird one that just didn't fit. And a number of years ago, it was taken out of that genus and put in its own. And if you look at the name Aeranthes, that's actually Aeranthes. That's actually an anagram of Aeranthes. It's monotypic, meaning it's the only one in this genus, called Aeranthes henrichia. Flowers, about 5-inch flowers, fairly good sized, leathery leaf plant looking like most of the Ingricoids, but it's quite hard to get established when you do get them. They do need quite a bit of shade, and just this and the last one both showed you they both illustrate the spur or nectary that comes out the back of these flowers. Some are short, most are long, and all are pollinated by night flowering moths. And everyone knows the story about Darwin predicting they'd find a moth for Angricum sesquipedale. Angriccoids in the New World, so that includes the Dendrophylax, which is the famed, it includes, this genus is not just this species, there's a number of Dendrophylax. This is the most stunning one, and this is the famed ghost orchid from Florida. It actually occurs in the southern 2 most counties of Florida, and nowhere else in the United States, but evidently it's also found in Cuba also. I didn't really realize that until recently. I knew there was a similar species, but I guess they're now all considered the same. So Dendrophylax lindinia. And this is weird to even think that this is a bandaceous orchid, but it is. This is an orchid that these Chiloschistas are leafless orchids. They may produce a couple little leaves in the base of the rosette there, in the center of the rosette. Those tend to fall off. They grow annually, but they tend to fall off relatively quickly, dry, but fall away quickly. So anyway, they're quite widespread in the Indian subcontinent. Thailand, Burma, there's some in Taiwan. Anyway, it's a tropical Asian genus. And this is what we think is possibly Untitled. This is going to be a chance to say something here. Whenever you see an orchid, or actually any scientific name that ends with ensis, it means it's from that area. So this actually means, from Yunnan. Untitled means from Yunnan. You see ensis or ensi. This denotes where the species, whether it's a plant or animal, is from. A few more bandaceous orchids. This is an Aeranthes. This started life as, or it was for a long time known as Esmeralda cathcardii with its relative Clarkii. Then they put it in a genus called Aeranthes, still by themselves, and then they realized, no, I guess through genetic work, it's actually part of the Aeranthes, the spider orchid, not our brassias, but the other Aeranthes are considered spider orchids also. But what I love about this 3-inch flower is those concentric rings of lines on them. This is from the Himalaya region. It's relatively easy to grow. It's not easy to get established, but it tends to invariably or eventually become established. But it's a wonderful thing. It has a hinge lip. The lip is mobile. It swings no matter which way you move the flower. So quite a large plant. It's quite a large plant though. Not a beautiful Phalaenopsis, but it's not a dog either. But what's interesting about this Philippine species, it's the only one on the sightings. It's the only one that's considered an endangered Phalaenopsis. I'm sure that will grow. I'm sure that list will grow. But this is quite a rare species. If you get the chance to get it, it's actually related to Violacea, Melina, and that group of Phalaenopsis. So Phalaenopsis Micholitziae. It's one you might look for. A new Vanda came out a number of years ago. It's actually very closely related to the other white species, also from Luzon, the Philippines, called Haberei. They're both cool-grained Vandas, so that means they can take down to about 50, no problem. And they're really lovely. I like them very much. The lip is completely different, or it's similar, but different enough to be able to tell. And somebody in the Bay Area, a gentleman named Carson Barnes, there was a grower in the Bay Area who imported a bunch of what he thought were Habereis, and then when they bloomed out, this guy noted that there's consistent difference with some of them, and he submitted it for observation or for to look at it, and it was determined to be a new species, and it's now called Vanda Barnesiae after Carson Barnes. This one isn't really any close. I can't say this genus really has any close relatives, but I just wanted it because I think the color of it is just stunning. This is the true color of it. Yes, the flowers are small. It's an Asian genus, Southeast Asian. This is Appendicola. Most of the species are white flowered. This is quite a large plant. The so-called canes are kind of floppy. They're reminiscent of a dendrobium plant, but it's completely unrelated to dendrobiums. This is a Philippine species called Appendicola malindagensis. I like Operonias very much. I only grow a few of them, but they're really stunning. And actually, if you look at this plant, each one of those yellow or that kind of white dot in the center, that's the column. That's the column cap on each individual flower. And those long hairs, those are just bracts. Those are just basically a modified leaf. I think it's a modified leaf, but it's a floral bract, not flowers. But this is what the plant looks like. Really is stunning. And you have these fan-shaped plants. Some are like a miniature iris looking like, or some maybe elongate, some have a lot more leaves than this, but they really are fun. And that's, every one of those is an individual flower. The little one you see in there is an individual flower. And I like this one a lot because it's kind of bronzy, orangey tint to the plant also. The Catacedinae is a New World group of orchids. It's a small group, but they're all amazing, and it's one of the few that has male and female flowers on the same plant. The plants themselves are not male or female, just the flowers. So generally they blow on a male spike or a female spike, occasionally both from the same spike, which it's interesting because it's one of the few orchids I know, few orchid groups that I know of that has asymmetrical flowers. If you look at it, the petals and sepals are all kind of like off to one side. The column twists around and the lip is not quite symmetrical. So they're interestingly and elegantly asymmetrical. Their common name is the goblin orchids, but no one really refers that to them. The old books will call them that. This is a beautiful one called Bermudes elegans. They tend to grow from a very small bulb to a large bulb quickly because in nature they tend to grow on decaying wood. One species was even discovered of a thatched hut in the genus, a beautiful one. This for a long time was thought to be related to Cymbidiums. But through DNA work, they realized that Gallianders are related to this group. They're the Catacedinae. But anyway, I like them very much. This one we've never been able to, I I've not been able to figure it out. This belongs to Martin Turkel. They tend to be warm growing, sometimes intermediate. One of the most beautiful species is part of a big feature in the Amazon flooded forest, but they're not all that easy to grow. They range from one species that's found as a terrestrial in Florida and all the way down to Argentina. This is not one of the most exciting cymbidiums. It really is just, it's not homely, it's just like, okay, that's nice. But what's cool about this is it's a saprophyte. This and two other species have no leaves, no chlorophyll, and like some of these other terrestrial orchids, some of the terrestrial orchids that I mentioned, that the spike just comes out of the ground, that's what this one does. I've seen a couple of these in the United States. I actually had one for a very brief period, but it's something that you can't really duplicate the culture for. So this one was photographed at Holger Perner's Chengdu. The capital of Sichuan is Chengdu. He had a greenhouse there and then went up in the mountains for the superpedia. But anyways, the Cattleya alliance is huge. The genus Epidendrum is one of the largest in the orchid family with, I think it's somewhere between 15 and 1800 species. This one here is called Ilensi. It was found in Ecuador a number of years ago, and I believe Callaway Dodson, who I mentioned earlier, was instrumental in part of this. Anyway, they found the species. I believe they brought it back to Selby Gardens legally at that time, and they determined it was a new species. They went back to the area where it was found. Ilensi is one you should seek out. The flowers last a long time. You see them bloom for months on end, and it's really just, you can see it's a beautiful orchid. A friend of mine has this. This is a genus, they're somewhat like Encyclia, sort of, in plant, but the plant doesn't have ground suitable, it has kind of like cigar suitables, and long spike that seems to grow, keep flowering and flowering for quite a bit of time. They're all Caribbean, so they're basically warm growing. And this one is one of the rarest, and there's hardly any of these plants in the United States. My friend has this plant. Andy Phillips is trying to get a piece of that from him, has tried for years. Anyway, this is one of the several Cycillus bifida. This is not rare, but it certainly is bizarre. And if we just kind of familiarity breeds contempt about this one, because we've seen it a lot, but really if you just look at that, you've never seen that before, you would look at that and wonder. Look at that lip, that's about a 4-inch flower. That lip is just fringed completely all the way around. It smells wonderful, kind of like citrus, like a lemon lime kind of smell. They're really wonderful, easy to grow, easy to come by. This is the species that was instrumental in making most of the Cattleya hybrids with the big frilly lips. I won't say all the hybrids, but all the big Cattleya flowers with the frilly lip, the crisp, undulated margin lip comes from this species. This is from Mexico and Honduras. Guatemala and Honduras, and that part of Central America. Anyway, it's easy to come by, easy to grow. It's one of two species, the other one being Glauca. Another Oncidianides. So now we're in the Oncidianide, not another, but we're in the Oncidianide. This is another new world genus or group of orchids. Many genera. It's gone through a whole bunch of taxonomic turmoil. These Tolumnias are what we used to call Equiton Oncidiums. This one's quite a rare one. It's the only real cool growing one. I saw this in Love Telebogans. What I love about them is they're just this incredible, the patterns on them. And something about their elusiveness, their intractability to be able to be grown easily. They live, this is right near a river. That little bright area you see in the picture, that was a river right behind it. So they're always in this kind of breezy, real humid, fairly good elevation things. And what's really cool about them is that whole fuzzy thing in the middle, the petals and the column and all that, that's to mimic a female fly. There's actually two theories. But it's one of the ones they call a flower that's considered to be pollinated pseudocopulation. So a male fly, a tachnid fly, thinks he's found a female and tries to mate with the flower. The other theory is, and I've only heard this once, is that actually a male fly thinks it's another male fly and tries to fight with it and then takes the pollen that way. I don't know which story is true. I believe that the pseudocopulation story, that's a female. It's more likely, it's more common in the orchid family, but really, so this is one I don't want to get into with anybody because I don't know where to really take it, but with Odontoglossums, the whole genus got put into the genus Oncidium. There's an argument, there's a new book out on Odontoglossums, so I'm not making any judgment, but what I think is incredible is this species. This is a fairly rare species that my friend Steve Beckendorf was instrumental in rediscovering. He went to the Santa Marta region of Colombia, that region has the tallest coastal mountains in the world. So right off the coast are these gigantic mountains that go quite high. And up in the mountains, they relocated this species, which was lost for a number of years, called Pleurothalids around the city of Medium. And this is actually, my friend Steve gave me a piece of this plant. This is my plant right here. I grow it under lights in my garage. Genus Dendrobium, another huge genus, maybe close to 2,000 species. So wide, it's actually what's called an Australasian genus. So many species, so diverse, so many floral habits. I've been communicating a number of years with basically the main orchid taxonomist in Australia who's studying the genus. So most things that we know got put into Dendrobium, but it may end up being that they go out of Dendrobium. I think they're not closely related, but it has an identical plant habit. It's in the same section called Rarity. It's also from Borneo. It's also expensive, and it's also hard to establish, but it has 3-inch flame orange flowers. I thought I always wanted to see this. I guess it's a fringe thing, but I always wanted to see one of these. But I thought it would be like an 1.5 to 2-inch flower. So my friend Cindy Hill, who's probably the best personal grower I've ever met, she brought this to a meeting, and not only did I get to see it in bloom, but she brought it in as a specimen. This is actually a part of her plant. This is a wonderful thing. If you like the species, you're going to want to try and buy one in bloom, because this is a species, for whatever reason, has a lot of self-pollinating forms that flowers don't open up to seed pods on their own. Extremely rare. Cindy Hill and another friend of mine had a small plant. He got one flower, but Cindy's the only one I knew who grew this and it thrived, and she bloomed it, and she wrote an article for Orchids magazine a number of years ago. This is a New Guinea species. You can see it has this little rambling plant, and it grows on she grew on a slanted piece of cork, and the plant really never touched the wood. It had these little stilt-like roots that would reach down to the wood about an inch or so. But anyway, it's a member of the Calyptrocolla sections, like Dendrobium lawsii and subclass in that group. But what's interesting, look at the lip. The lip's nearly closed. This group of orchids is really brightly colored, and there's no fragrance. They tend to be pollinated by sunbirds in the wild, because birds they can't smell fragrances, I believe, and that's what I've heard, and that they are attracted to bright colors. So the Stanopia group, incredible group of orchids, very strange pollination schemes. People just kind of go, I don't really, I like them a lot. People just don't really want to grow them because they get big. But if you get a good sized plant, they tend to drop spikes over a period of time. They're not all just one spike once a year. A good sized plant, not only a giant one, but a good sized plant will produce a number of spikes in succession over a period of time. This rare one from Colombia called Posadas. Similar to the Posadas, who own Columba Orchids, fantastic nursery outside of Medellin. Anyway, it's a wonderful species, quite rare, expensive. I want to say quickly about this, is that these two are pollinated by those euglossine bees I talked about with the Catacetinae. These little male bees of the blues and greens. They come in here, so there's a concavity on the inside of that rounded part of the lip, that nose, that big honker nose of the lip. There's a concavity in the back. The bees go there and they try to scrape wax to bring back to their nest. So after they do that, it's so waxy, they can't grab a hold, so they kind of slide down between the horns, and they come out and they grab. There's a little capture where when they hit it, it throws the pollen on their head or the back or their butt, depending on the species. Some species like Oculata and Rarity, the flowers can be all different colors, different patterns, but what's unique is that the lip shape is always the same. That's when you learn Stanopia, you actually start picking up on that. This is that species because the lip is identical to that. And you kind of know where they were from, where the plant actually, what country they're from. But it's a pretty cool thing. Beautiful thing here, I love this, is the plant grows like a little, not mini, but it's kind of like a small Stanopia, big single leaf and a semi-conical bulb. This is a Siva Kingia. It's one of about, I think there's about 16 species now. This is a Colombian one. Flowers on this species are about 2 inches. And I love it. It's called Siva Kingia rickenbackiana. These grow intermediate to warm. There's a lot of species. I think this is one of the most exciting ones with the fringes all over the petals and the lip. Another beautiful genus. This is it was one of my favorite genera to grow when I was growing warm. I used to grow my original light guard when I first started When I first started with 40-something years ago, and I still have the same case, I still grew out of it. I used to grow warm and humidity growing grow Caffeinias. Anyway, this is a species called Haberei, and this is an albino form, albiform. And if this flower was spread out flat, it would be 10 to 12 inches across. It would be nearly a foot across. But they're so heavy in, not heavy, but the flowers, they're so long they just kind of drape down. This too has about 16 species from Mexico, from Guatemala all the way down to South America, typically to as far south as Peru, and there's some over to Venezuela and Trinidad. Aeranthes, the bucket orchids, incredible, almost actually as incredible as the Stanhopias and their pollination strategy. So everything you're seeing here with the orange knob and the red lip, and all that thing is just the lip of the orchid. The wings, what we call wings, those are the lateral sepals. The petals are little kind of wrinkly things. I actually borrowed this plant from a friend of mine because I never got to see it in bloom. She let me borrow it in bud, and I kept going up to the greenhouse, and I waited, and finally it started to crack, and I got to photograph all these stages of it opening. In about 45 minutes, the flowers are completely open. When it first opened completely, the wings were real, what I call the wings, the lateral sepals were very, very smooth and rounded and broad, and actually within a very short period of time, they started wrinkling. Those are they've not gone bad, they just do that as part of their thing. Something that used to be in considered part of the Stanhope group, now in three genera, Soleopsis, Peristeria, and Lycomormia are in a separate group called the Coleopsinae. Anyway, so Peristeria, it's one of the first 5 orchids on the endangered species list. It's the national flower of Panama. It's called the Holy Ghost Orchid. Has a suitable, it's terrestrial, but has a suitable size of a large cantaloupe. Has 3 or 4 pleated leaves that are stand a good 3 feet tall. Has erect inflorescences on this species. These wonderful flowers. The reason they call it the Holy Ghost Orchid is because of the dove. Peristeria means dove, and because of the dove inside the column wings are the dove's wings, and the head of the dove with the little beak. And it's a pretty cool orchid. Each flower is only about 1.25 inches, maybe 1.5 inches. Bolophyllums, fantastic genus. There's probably close to 2,000 species. There are several related genera like Trias and Synipia and others. And through taxonomic work, they put them all into Bolophyllum recently. So there's about. This is my plant of an Australian species. I grow it unheated in the backyard, in my greenhouse. It's called Bolophyllum schillerianum. It's a Eastern Australian species, and I love it. It doesn't bloom from the leaf. It actually blooms these masses of flowers along the rhizome. It comes out between the sheaths, the bracts on the rhizome, so it's pretty cool. It always blooms around now. Starts around Christmas time. I have a lot of flowers like this. Very cool one, Bolophyllum lindiscotoides. This is a deciduous plant. It has a dry rest period. You don't want to keep it very wet during that period, or else you'll rot the bulbs. This group of most Bolophyllums have, I should start off with this. Most have a single leaf per bulb. The deciduous species always have 2 leaves per bulb. They almost all have a mobile lip, a hinged lip, and a lot of them smell really bad from. This is a real sad story. It's one of those beautiful Bolophyllums. The fragrance is not, it has a slight smell, but it's not going to choke you. This was found in a national park in Malaysia. And they discovered when they flowered it actually got the name the $1 million bulba because everybody wanted it. Unfortunately, because it was found in a park, it was extirpated. It was basically made extinct in the wild. Hopefully they'll find other populations elsewhere, but that means they stole all the plants they could get out of a national park. So really not a good thing. And this one, I said there's another relative of the other deciduous one. This is it. This is Bolophyllum camosum. And I don't know, something about that to me is an extremely exciting orchid. That leaves me speechless. I think it's a really, truly beautiful orchid. I really like it. It has a deciduous plant, and the bulbs are very knobby, very knobbly looking, weird little pseudobulbs. It seems to be a little easier than most, but again, it's not, I won't consider it easy by any means. The last group of orchids I'm going to talk about tonight, this group of the Pleurothalids, there's probably, I don't even know how many genera there are now, how many groups there are now in this group, in this section. I think there's probably more than 50 genera, and some of them are like Mastivae or Strepias, Draculas, Horror Blossoms. Anyway, so Mastivae has like more than 550 species. This is our first book that we wrote, was on Mastoideus. This is one I photographed at a nursery in Colombia, and it's Cannabis is fairly common in cultivation, but I've never seen this one before or since. The flower is about a 5 to 6 inch flower with its tails. It's a beautiful thing. It's Colombian. Some of them go into Venezuela. It's just to me, it's such a beautiful orchid. Mastoideus always have these 3 tails. Some tails of those sepals are very short. If you look at the flower, most of it is sepals. Those 2 little things coming up alongside the column, those are the petals. The little white thing in front is the lip, and the column obviously is in the middle of the petals. So most of the part of the flowers on Mastoideus are the sepals. A very odd one, this is Mastoideus caudivulva. It's not really closely related to any other Mastoideus. It's a Colombian species. You don't see it all that frequently. It's not super easy to grow. I mean, a good grower of Mastoideus with perfect conditions can grow, not perfect, but has cool conditions, can grow this species. So caudivulva means twisted tails, but I think kind of come up with a better name than that. Beautiful one. This was actually found by the late Walter Teague. He didn't find the plant. He actually went to Bolivia. One of the first orchid enthusiasts to go to Bolivia, which was not very well known and probably still isn't very well known, flora there, and found a seed pod and brought it back and flasked it, and turned out to be this new species of Mastoideus called rubiola. It's stunning. A friend of mine has a couple plants, but he's been trying to get seed pods on it for years. Actually, I have a piece of this plant now. I'm very thrilled to have it. We don't know what it is other than it's in the section Saltatrices. I love it very much. It's a Colombian species. Flowers are about 4 inches from top to bottom. Pleurothalids, it's a huge group. It used to be very large, but through DNA work, they realized a lot of things are no longer Pleurothalids, but there are a number of them, still hundreds of them still. So this is a very large plant. This Colombian species called Pleurothalids Marthe has a tall plant. It gets to be about 1.5 feet tall, big heart-shaped leaves, almost like an anthurium or something. Anyway, it's usually a red and pinkish flower. This is an unusual yellow flower form that I got to see at my friends in Australia. The best species collection in Australia that I've ever seen there. So anyway, Pleurothalids Marthe. This is my kind of Pleurothalids liniana, same group Pleurothalids as the last one. It was named, it was discovered not that long ago. I've had it for about 15 or so years, maybe 12 years, but it wasn't named that much long before that. It blooms again and again on the same leaves. Flowers are about 3/4 of an inch. Plant's not that big. It's not quite an inch, but it's only about 6 to 7 inches tall. Stelis is everyone like, just another Stelis. I think I just like this picture of it. Stelis, there's so many of them. People just go, oh, that's another Stelis. So this one is called Stelis butcheri. Henry Butcher was an expat that moved to Panama, lived the remainder of his years in Panama. Took us out a couple times when I was there in 1982 and 83. Anyway, this is named in his honor, so I believe it's probably a Panamanian species. It's a great genus. There's about 1,000 species now. This one is probably one of the choices to have. It has these wonderful, beautiful foliage. The flowers are little jewels of orange and pink and reddish colors. If you look at the one leaf kind of in the lower middle, that looks like a fish skeleton. Each one of those denotes each one of those was a flower before. It just elongates as a sequential flowered inflorescence. And what's nice about this species for people who grow in warmer areas, it's an intermediate growing species. We actually saw it in a fairly warm place in Colombia, but it's people seem to grow cool okay, but it's actually intermediate growing. It just needs high humidity and good water. Another beautiful one, this is my plant of Panthers Capromulgus. It's a wonderful species. It's only got a few close relatives. It has these chains of like 2 or 3 flowers per inflorescence, and this was a really nice mass blooming. The clone is called Gorgeous Goobers, and this plant for a long time was the only, it may still be the only true Capromulgus known, but anyway, it's wonderful. It's a beautiful species. Marnie Triquel was one of the authors of the species from Peru. Flowers are about anywhere from a little over an inch to my plant. I got a plant from Marnie, and for whatever reason, mine gets about 2.5 inch flowers, these gigantic flowers. So I think it's very exciting, very beautiful Aeranthes. The last Aeranthes I'm going to show you is this one they call Elgato in Colombia, meaning the cat. Now I always wondered why. They will turn your head upside down. It's got cat ears. It's not okay. I can see that now. But it's an expensive orchid to buy. It comes in a number of color varieties, mostly green with red or nearly solid red, but it's got those weird, wonderful, erect green petals. And then that little thing in the middle is the column, and that little V at the bottom, that's the entire lip on it. It's a ridiculously small lip on that species. And Dracula, I believe, is the last genus we're going to talk about tonight. There's over 100, I think somewhere between 110 and 120 species. This is a relatively recently named species from Peru called Saúl, named after Saúlai, named after Saúl, who's a worker for Peru Flora. Anyway, it's great. They have these little faces. You can see the lip in the center is kind of like an underside of a mushroom. And interestingly enough, these are to mimic a fungus, and they do smell like fungus, and they're pollinators of fungus gnats. Most should be grown in baskets because they have pendant spikes. There's a few with erect spikes, but the flowers still hang down. But that's a very interesting genus with flowers anywhere from about 3/4 of an inch to 18 inches with tail length. Dracula flora is a really rare species, very expensive if you can even find it. It's got about 8-inch flowers. It's such a stunner. I think this just kind of typifies it. You see the face, and again, the gill-like structures on the lip mimicking a fungus. Dracula vampira, well, it's kind of funny in the name. And Dracula just means little dragon, but Dracula vampira, somebody went with that. And then this clone got named Bela Lugosi. It's got an FCC with the AOS. It's a species from Ecuador. Most are from Colombia, but there's a number from now have been found in Ecuador. And John Leather has gotten this plant. I think it tends to be about a 9-inch flower. He's got a 14-inch flower on this clone in his collection. And the last one is just this pair of Dracula Amalia from Colombia that want to say thank you very much for sitting through my long talk, and hopefully that you enjoyed it very much. And one last slide is to show you our new book that just came out. We're just getting it right now.